This tutorial is a continuation of tunnel books. In this one, I'm going to cover a smaller book, a 6x6 book, with an Alice in Wonderland theme. Just like with a steampunk book, I started with a pre-cut chipboard kit. It also has 6 pages. It's just a little bit smaller, and it also has the arches. Now at the end, I'm going to show you an older book that I did back, I think, in about 2011. And instead of arches, it has circles, so you can get an idea of how that would look. I started by creating the spines, and I cut these out of lightweight chipboard, just like you saw me do in the last one. And this time, though, I'm going to make them a little bit smaller. I don't need as much space between each of the pages. So the chipboard is now 1 inch, and that gives me 1/4 of an inch on each side for the tabs, and then it gives me 1/2 inch in the center, and so that'll have 1/2 inch spacing between each page. Now, in order to make it easy to fold those tabs down, I take an X-Acto knife and a metal ruler, and I just slightly score in a line into that. You don't want to cut all the way through, and then that will give me a way to easily fold that. And once I'm done with that, then I'm going to cover the outside with paper, and I'm going to paint the inside. Now, the paper that I'm using on the outside is something that I came up with to make the outside of the spine look like cards. And so I have these images for you on my blog, and of course I will have a link in the bottom to my blog site so that you can get all the extras, because I have a lot of extras for you this time. And of course all the other information that's normally there. So these things are 6 inches high. Actually, they're a little bit taller than 6. I think 6.1 inches, and that's just to make sure that if for some reason you don't cut it exactly 6 inches, you've got a little bit of room on the paper to trim it. I didn't want it to end up being too short, and then you would have parts of the chipboard exposed. So it's slightly longer than the chipboard, and then just like the chipboard, it's 1 inch wide. Now on the inside, I'm going to paint it black. Next, I cover the front page with decorative paper, then turn it over and attach the first spine by gluing the tab to the inside of that first page. After I'm done with that, then I will add the decorative paper to the back side of the front page. And I'm also adding any elements that are going to be flat, things that I'm going to glue down, paper images that I'm going to glue down, and they won't be popped up. So anything that's being popped up or any dimensional elements are going to get added later so that they don't get in the way of me constructing the book. And so you can see here on the inside, I've added the decorative paper, but then I've also added a stone arch and some greenery to the front. And then notice how it peaks up over the top and it peaks out from the side. So don't think about just having things peek through the tunnel as you're looking through it, but you can also have things peek off the sides of the book. Next, I'm going to glue the second page, the front of the second page, to the other tab on that first spine. And once I get that attached, then I'm going to do the decorative paper on that. And then again, I'm going to go to the back side, and now I can attach my second spine using the tab to the back side of the second page, and then continue on in that fashion. Each time I attach the spine, then I go in and cover everything with paper, so that covers both the chipboard page, and it also covers the tab and where that was attached to that page. Now, something else I was going to mention that I didn't mention the first one, and as you go along constructing this, you're going to have to cut away the paper from the openings. And the way I find is the easiest is, you can see here, I just put the book, I open it to whatever page I need to cut the paper away, and I put it on the edge of my table, and then I use an X-Acto knife to go around and cut it. That way it's nice and flat to cut that out, and it doesn't interfere with any of the other parts of the book. This project was a very image-intensive project. I used a lot of collage sheets and a lot of images to build all the scenes on each of the pages. I did use some dimensional items as well, and I'll go through those as I explain to you what I did on each page. But to start with here, I've used 3 of my Alice in Wonderland collage sheets that are full of all kinds of images. And then I have digital versions, 2 different digital versions that have a lot of those same images plus more. And then I just used some other ones that were into the woods and the leaves so that I could add those types of elements. And then the last one you see there is something called Strange People, and I framed a lot of these goofy people's faces on indoor scenes. And there's also digital versions of that as well with tons of characters. There's like 82 different kinds of characters in there. And then I also used my Elegant Frames digital set as well to do the frames around the people. Then in addition, there's also digital image sets for the leaves as well, and you get all the same leaves that are on the collage sheet. And then in addition to that are collage sheets from Alpha Stamps. Included are sheets that have architecture, a sheet that has forest and greenery, one that has miniature books, and another Alice sheet. And then a couple of digital kits. One is of different color curtains, and then furniture. Now I'm going to walk you through each of the pages and how I put them together, and I'll start with the cover, which is basically a collage of Alice in Wonderland related elements. And let's start at the top left with a big book, and I will cover that separately, how I put that together. And then around the opening I have the greenery, and then here you can kind of see a picture of looking into the tunnel, and you can see all the little elements poking through from each page. And then now if you go back to the front cover, I used a metal key, then a image of the Hatter's hat, then 3 miniature cards, and then of course roses, a chess piece, then you see the rabbit, and then down in the far corner I've got a collage of paper flowers and some leaves and a butterfly and also a couple little toadstools. And then I have a crown with a stick pin, and the stick pin, the top at the heart is a stick pin, and it goes through a whole bunch of beads, of heart beads, going from the smallest to the largest, and then the crown at the bottom holds it. And then if you keep moving across the bottom, I've got an image of a snail, and then of course large toadstools, and the flowers with the faces, another butterfly, and then Alice. Now anything that I used in the book that is not in one of the collage sheets that I mentioned earlier, I will have for you on my blog to download. So for example, on the front cover here, the little flower fairy faces, I'm going to have that for you. So there'll be a link at the bottom, and then you can go over and get it. But there's several things that I have out there for you, including the things that I used to make the book. So to construct the book, I first started with a Alice in Wonderland book cover. Now that's one of those things that you can download, and then two separate pages of the real book. And so I have those for you as well. And what I did is I printed a bunch of those 2 pages on a heavier paper. I use presentation paper, matte presentation paper, and that was just to create a whole bunch of bulk. And then I printed, I think, 4 pages of the 2 pages on a very lightweight paper, like copier paper, very thin paper, because I'm going to use those thinner pieces to create some dimension in the book. So you want to print enough that if you were to stick it inside the book with the cover closed, that it fills it up, even though it's not going to be that way, but you just want enough bulk. So the first picture that you see the inside of the cover. I have inked the edges, anything that you're going to see, and then you can see piles of the pages. So the 2 center piles are the thick stuff, and then the 2 end piles are the thin paper. Now we go to the next picture on the top left, and now what I've done is I've glued the stacks of the thick paper together. So those don't open up, they're all glued together, and then I glued them inside the book. So that really fills them up. And notice how I didn't just glue them flat down, I glued them to the cover, but also kind of at an angle. So when they meet together at an angle, they're glued together that way. And then next to that, you see the 2 stacks of the thin paper. Now we go on to the part about how to make it dimensional. If you look down at the bottom left, you see the arrow. So now what I've done is I now glue those pages on, those thin pages. I just run a little bead of glue right along the inside edge. I don't want to glue the whole page down. I just want to attach it to the other heavy pages that are all glued together. I just want to attach it along that edge. So I glued those pages one at a time, like the 4 pages. I put a bead of glue down there, put that one on, another bead of glue, put that one on, and I did that for both sides. So these pages are really relatively loose. Now the next step is now how I'm going to make that dimensional hump that you see. So I'm going to go down to the bottom loose page. So not this one on the top, but the bottom, and I'm going to take it and glue the other side of it to the pages underneath, but I'm going to glue it just a little bit in. So, maybe like 1/8 of an inch in, so that you're still going to see the outside edge of the pages, the heavy pages, they're glued together. And then you're going to glue that down. And I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep moving the next page a little more towards the center of the spine, gluing that down. So that way you just get this look of the pages are kind of start getting puffed up as you glue each one. And I do the same thing on the left and on the right. And then of course the final page is the one that's glued in the closest to the spine. And then you get that hump look. So that's basically how I built the book. Now we have the first image. This is when Alice sees the rabbit, and I've printed a bunch of images from the collage sheets, and I've sized the arch to fit that opening. And that's one of the nice things about using a digital kit, is because the images are all separate and you can make them whatever size you want. So the original size of this is much smaller. I've made it much larger. Plus those images are really high quality, so they can hold their resolution and still look good when you make them really big or very small. And of course there's Alice and the rabbit and some butterflies and also some trees, and those are the trees that you're seeing poking out in the front. Now this scene is Alice falling down the rabbit hole. And in terms of the background, of course, I've got some decorative yellow paper. I've got some trim at the top. And then I've got a chair and a table. Those are kind of popped up with double-sided stick tape. And then I've got the little door on the bottom. And then on the table, you see the key that goes to that door. And then you see the Drink Me bottle. And then on the walls, you see a bunch of pictures framed. Now, those are the strange people that I have on the one big collage sheet. And then I've used my frame collage sheet to frame those. So I thought, you know, that would work well with the wackiness and whimsy of Alice in Wonderland. And then you see Alice coming and falling down. I got her upside down, and then I've got cards and books falling and dishes falling. The cups and the saucers are plastic. They're three-dimensional. And then you can also see curtains behind. Now those are going to be the backside of the curtains on the next scene. And then of course a clock. And now you see Alice again. This is, I believe, when she's in the rabbit's house. There's the cake on a table. Now that's the same table. So what I did is I flipped the table. So I put one of the table images on the other page, and then this one on this page, and then they just glued together between the pages. And so it's exactly the same table. And then of course you see more of the strange people framed, and of course Alice there, the piece of cake. And then you can notice how you can see Alice falling through the hole from the page in front of it. Now we have the scene of Alice meeting the Cheshire Cat. And you see a forest. There's one of those collage sheets was forest, so I cut that up and collaged it into pieces to make it fit. And of course you've got the cat, and you've got the this way, that way sign, Alice. And you've got the same little flowers with the faces. And I said I have that on the collage sheet. And then you've got, I just have this bee in my stash, and he's carrying a honey pot. And I just love that image, and it's very whimsical. So I thought it would be cute in the scene. And I have that for you on my blog as well. And then of course, as you look through the hole, as we keep going into the tunnel, you can see more and more things peeking through the tunnel. Now we've got a scene at the Duchess' house when the frog is coming to give the Duchess an invitation to croquet from the Red Queen. And we've got Alice standing at the front door. And then you can see the house that I did, it wasn't quite tall enough and big enough for this. So I just printed it twice and cut up pieces of it to make it fit. And then that collage sheet also had all these roses. So I just cut out lots of different, I printed the roses many times and then just pieced them on and just to make it look really dimensional. And then as you look through, you can see a little bit of Alice, you can see a little bit of the curtains, and you can see the tail from the Cheshire Cat hanging at the top of the arch. We're back in the woods again, and now Alice runs into the caterpillar. And then I've just added a few more nature elements to the scene. I've got an owl, I've got a rabbit, and then of course the toadstool that he's sitting on, plus a couple others just to kind of add a little bit more interest to the scene. My favorite scene is always the tea party. It's the most interesting. And so for this, I've got curtains. Of course, I've got the clock with the smile on it. And you see the March Hare holding a cup up. Now that cup and saucer, that is the same plastic three-dimensional cup and saucer that you saw when Alice was falling down the hole. And then you've got a table set with teapots and tea and cakes and things like that. And you've got the dormouse at the bottom. And then, of course, you've got two chairs, and you've got the Hatter standing on one of the chairs. And then those elements, the teapot and the cakes and things like that, will be seen from the other side. Now this scene has nothing to do with Alice in Wonderland. It's a through the looking glass scene with Alice in Wonderland mixed into it. And mostly just because I like Tweedledee and Tweedledum and I like Humpty Dumpty. So I just kind of snuck them into this story. So what you see is I've got a wall. I'm using the same sky paper that you saw on the very first one with the arch. Now that I have for you. And then of course I have the big head of the Cheshire Cat looking on. You've got Humpty reaching down, and the molding that you see on top of the brickwork, that's the molding that also was in the house. So the house came in very handy to use pieces of that as trim on other pages. Then you've got some hedges at the bottom. You've got Tweedledee, Tweedledum, the guy painting the roses. And then what I did is I cut out some little bitty roses and glued them on top of the red roses so that it would look like only half of them were painted. And then of course you got Alice reaching her hand up to Humpty Dumpty. And I've double-sided the Tweedledee and Tweedledum images so that you will see them peeking into the scene that's behind. Now we have the croquet scene, and I'm using the same sky paper. The collage sheet with the house on it also had the fencing that I've got in the background there. Of course, I've got the cat again. And then trees, same kind of trees I've been using. There's Alice and the Queen, and then I've got the flamingos from the collage sheet, and the little hedgehog at the bottom, which in the croquet game is the ball. That is three-dimensional, and so that's just glued on there. And I used a little bit of E6000 because it's glued on its side. It needed to be really sturdy. And then I've used a checkerboard floor from the collage sheets. And then if you look really closely here in a close-up, you can see the two boys looking through the tunnel at the scene. The final scene is the trial, and it is packed with images. I've got the background paper, I've got curtains, and then I've got the king and the queen sitting on their thrones. And in the background, I've used some of those strange people, and I use them as the jury. And then you've got the henchman, the guy that cuts everybody's head off on the executioner, I guess, on the left side. You've got the table with the tarts. There's a tart missing in the middle, if you notice. There's only two. And then you've got the rabbit in his outfit with his trumpet and whatnot. And then I've got a column. And I use this because it just gave me a way to get so much into the scene and to incorporate the cards that come flying at Alice. And so I do have that column for you as well. And then of course you've got Alice, and then you've got a whole bunch of cards, and that's from the collage sheet. So I think pretty much all the elements except for the column came from one or more of the collage sheets. And for the final look, I just wanted you to see what the spine ends up looking like when we put it all together. And as I mentioned before, I have those images for you to make the spine look like cards if that's something that you want to do. Now, this is an Alice book that I did several years ago, and it's 4x4, so smaller than the last one. And instead of arches, it's holes. And I started with a piece of chipboard that was 4x4, and then I have a template where it has different size holes on it, and I cut the first hole. And then I cut two more pieces of chipboard with smaller holes, and then a solid back. And then the design of this book is a little bit different. It's more collage style through the whole thing as opposed to creating scenes. And so here you have a lot of images on the front that are very much related to the story, a combination of both Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass. And then if you look inside, it's not so much sceney, it's just more like just having elements that would give you references to bits of the story. And I think you can see that even more here. You know, I've got all kinds of scenes of her, and the other one I've kind of got the falling through the rabbit hole, but you know, I'm showing with more than one of her that she's falling, and you're going to see the eye in the back there. And then, you know, I've just got this one page on the left with just the king and queen and cards, and then the chess pieces, and then the final piece in the back. And I like the idea of a little girl peeking through a keyhole. And then you might also notice that I use some trim around the edges, and that's chipboard trim that's been cut out, die cut. And it kind of acts as a stand, but you have to have it on both on the front and the back pages. So just gives you another idea of a tunnel book with a hole instead, a smaller one, and in a little bit different style. I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you liked the Alice theme, and I've given you some more ideas. And as I've mentioned before, you can hop over to my blog. The link will be in the description area, and you can download the free images. You can get the supply list and more information on the collage sheets, as well as more pictures if you just want to look at some photographs and not have to keep stopping the video. And the next one I'm going to do is going to be called Secret Garden.